stand for any attacks on our cities, attacks on our minds. We must educate the youth so that they can find joy in education and happiness in helping our sisters and brothers. We will take back control of our communities and help out one another. Oh, Baltimore, Black Baltimore, you shall always rise in our eyes. There will be no injustice that we will allow to stand the test of time. But we must elect better people to represent our interest. We must vote and educate our youth. Freedom, economic justice, and peace is what we pursue. Oh, Black Baltimore, we will not let you down. Our history's too great, our skin perfectly brown. But I stand here today so the world can hear us say that we are one people, one Baltimore. Hail Baltimore today. So my Black Baltimoreans, we will never sit around and be feeble, because all power belongs to the people. Thank you.
Oh, Baltimore, y'all feeling the burn? Thank you, brother. That was a beautiful poem. Give a round of applause for these two brothers one more time. All right, now, it wouldn't be appropriate if we were in this space and did not have thanks for the Lord. So help me. If you mind, we're going to go to church for 1 second. Is that fine? All right. So help me welcome the home choir and praise team, Carter Memorial Baltimore's praise team. Come on, let's make some noise in here. Come on, come on. Anybody feel the burn? I didn't hear you. I said, anybody feel the burn? Oh, yeah. Well, let's give God a hand praise. Come on, let's give him a praise that he deserves. Come on, let's give it to him. Give it to him. It's a real simple song. I think some of you may have heard this song before. It's real simple. The song is real simple. I want you to help us with this. Can I get somebody to clap their hands like this? Come on. Clap their hands like this. Come on. I want you to sing this with us. It's real simple. It goes like this. Oh.
guys, it's Elizabeth Woodson reporting for the Real News Network. I'm here at the Carter Memorial Church of God in Christ, where Bernie Sanders will be joined by Danny Glover, Ben Jealous, and Jamal Bryant on a panel. The discussion is focused on black bodies and the young black man experience in Baltimore City. As you can see behind me, they're starting the scene nicely with a lot of singing and poetry. And then later on at 7:30, Bernie Sanders and the other guests will begin our discussion. Executive producer and senior editor Paul Jay sat down with Danny Glover and Bernie Sanders early this morning and had a brief interview. If you could cut to that interview now, and we will see that.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore, and now joining us in Baltimore is Senator Bernie Sanders. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And activist Danny Glover. Thank you for joining us. Danny is here as a supporter of Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, if you talk to people in Baltimore, either about the extraordinary murder rate, which is last year around 348, the same murder rate more or less as New York, which has 13 times the population, or you talk about mass incarceration, or you talk about systemic racism, it usually boils really down to one question, which is lack of employment and low wages. It really comes down to that. Now, I know you've proposed a $1 trillion infrastructure spending plan that would create jobs, but Baltimore has a pretty bad history when it comes to private-public partnerships, where investment money, for example, in the Inner Harbor, in the name of creating jobs, makes a lot of money for developers and the billionaire class, and not really does much about employment and poverty. How would your plan be different?
First of all, thank you for recognizing what too few people do recognize, and that is when you have unemployment rates of 30, 40, 50%, when kids have no opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet, go out in the adult world, become independent, bad things happen. And that's a crisis that has got to be dealt with. So in addition to proposing a $1 trillion jobs program, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, what we also have proposed is a program along with Congressman John Conyers, which focuses on youth unemployment, specifically putting young people to work, putting them into school, getting them the job training that they need. Because at the end of the day, if kids have some income and they're doing some constructive activity, the likelihood that they get mixed up in illegal activity is much, much less. So focusing on young people especially, providing jobs and education rather than jails and incarceration would be a major priority of a Sanders administration.
In the delivery of that, would you consider a Roosevelt-style direct federal jobs program, perhaps targeting the inner cities like
Absolutely.
Baltimore?
Absolutely.
Because when it's come through the cities and the states, a lot of times ordinary people don't get the money.
That is exactly right. I mean, there are two elements. Number one, we have to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. And that is our roads and our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants, airports, rail, et cetera, et cetera. But second of all, when we talk about job creation, the federal money has got to go into those areas that need it the most. And what is happening in inner cities all over this country is a story that is not being effectively told, but we have crisis after crisis after crisis, crumbling public school systems, high unemployment, mass incarceration rates. We've got to start focusing on rebuilding inner cities in America.
So a direct federally funded jobs program is on the table with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, number two. I know you're running to win, and whether you win or don't win, you need as many votes as you can get to make this political revolution you're talking about possible. You've said you're going to endorse Senator Clinton, but you said something in addition to that to Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC. You said you will endorse her, but if you campaign for her, will really depend on what her stand is and what she adopts.
I want to see the Democratic Party have the courage to stand up to big money interests in a way that they have not in the past, take on the drug companies, take on Wall Street, take on the fossil fuel industry. And I want to see them come up with ideas that really do excite working families and young people in this country.
So that's a condition for you going out and really campaigning.
Well, let me just say two things. Number one, a Donald Trump presidency would be a disaster for this country. And I will do everything that I can to prevent that from happening. But I think the issue of how the kind of support that Secretary Clinton gets from the American people who have voted for me, is totally dependent upon her. And that is, she is going to have to excite people, convince people that she is in fact prepared to go outside of establishment politics and establishment economics. She is going to have to tell people that yes, the United States will join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all people as a right sooner than later, that we will have paid family and medical leave like virtually every other country on earth does, and that yes, she is going to stand up to the oligarchy which today controls our economic life, our political life, and our media life. And if she does that, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement for her. If she continues to be a proponent of establishment politics and establishment economics, I think she's going to get a lot of support from people who definitely want to defeat Donald Trump and see her as much more preferable, but she's not going to generate the excitement that I think we need.
And as you said in the quote I just read, the Democratic Party, also meaning Secretary Clinton, has no record of doing any of this in the past.
Not much. Not much. Look, we have a very low voter turnout in this country. A lot of working people, poor people do not vote because they don't really believe that either party stands up for their interests. They have the sense instinctually, which is a correct sense, that big money dominates what goes on politically. And if we're going to make the real changes, it's one thing to elect the president, that's fine. It's another thing to really change America. What does that mean? Should we have more income and wealth inequality than any other country? Should we be addressing the crisis of climate change in a much more aggressive way? Should we be dealing with the fact that 2.2 million people in this country are in jail more than any other country on earth in a way that we have not come close to begin to addressing? And the answer is, I think we have got to do that. But to do all of those things require a political party to say, you know what, sorry, billionaire class, you cannot have it all. We're going to transform our economics. We're going to transform our politics. And by the way, we're going to transform media as well. We're going to get the word out to people about what's really going on in this country in a way that the corporate media does not.
Assuming whether you win or don't win, you need as many votes as possible between now and the convention to have the clout going forward.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't really change your game plan very much.
That's right.
That being said, in terms of keeping this political revolution going you've been calling for, what does that look like and what do you do about it?
Well, it's a little bit premature. Right now my focus is
either way.
But right now my focus is on winning. My focus is on doing well on Tuesday in 5 states. We got a very, very big primary in California on June 7th, where I think we got a shot to win. So right now our immediate focus is on getting as many votes as we can in the primaries and caucuses that remain.
One of the main arguments one hears from people who really are not enthusiastic about Secretary Clinton, but are supporting her even in the primaries, is what some people have called the fear factor. They just think that she has a better chance of defeating Trump, that even though you're polling ahead of her, frankly, in against Trump, they're saying it's untested, that in a real campaign with tons of ads thrown at you, it could be different.
That's the Clinton line. But what is also untested is the kind of vicious attack that the Republicans would make against Clinton in a way that we have not gone anywhere near. I mean, they're going to be raising issues that we have stayed away from. We have tried to focus on the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself on the major issues. We have not gone into other areas where the Republicans certainly would. I think we are the stronger a campaign against Trump, not just because the polling now shows us that, but more importantly, the kind of excitement and enthusiasm that we are generating will result in more people coming out to vote. Democrats win when the voter turnout is high. Republicans win when the voter turnout is low. I worry very much that a Trump-Clinton race is just going to be a low voter turnout race, which gives him a shot to win. I don't think he will, by the way. I think she goes in as the favorite. But I think I am the stronger candidate between the two of us.
Danny, you supported Senator Sanders fairly early in the campaign. Why was this important to you to get involved in his campaign? And let me ask you a second part. As you're out campaigning, why are older African Americans, and I say that because younger African Americans do seem to be kind of joining Youth for Sanders, but a lot of older African Americans are not, and why not?
Well, the first question, certainly there's a relationship or a lure to the Clinton that has gone back for some time. It's gone back when he ran with his first administration and through his second administration as well. So black people have had African Americans have had been accustomed to seeing the Clintons. and being available for them in some sort of way. In fact, I remember one politician asked me, well, I've never heard of Bernie Sanders. This is a state senator. And I said, I don't understand why you haven't. The questions that you support, the ideas that you support are right there, the ideas that he supports. And certainly I came out, first of all, because I thought this was an important moment. It's a historic moment, an important moment in this country's history. And we've seen that translate through the Occupy movement. We've seen it through the various movements from the Dream Defenders to Black Lives Matters. We see all these things. And then most recent, and I think over a period of time, somebody has to talk about climate change, not only its impact on the rest of the world, but its impact on us as well. Somebody has to bring up the issues around the deindustrialization that's happened, that has removed jobs, good paying jobs, manufacturing jobs, jobs that would hire young people, transitional jobs that would hire people. And someone has to talk about that as the reasons why we have the connection between that, the informal economy that people exist in, and the formal economy in which they can't get into. Those are the issues around mass incarceration. No one has talked about that. Yeah, it's easy to pass a crime law demonizing those victims, those people victimized by policy they have no control over. Here, Bernie Sanders is talking about active citizenship, demos, ordinary citizens being participants, not only on the day of election, but continuously being consistent as citizens throughout the process. And that's exciting. That's exciting. When we responded to registering the vote and voting, we thought something was going to come out of it. And we know those periods. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, the civil rights organizing of voters down in the South during Freedom Summer, and all of that happened in a period where people saw change, the possibility of change. And I think, as Senator Sanders says, that this possibility of change, a new voice, another narrative, a way in which their issues are addressed, from child care to health care, from global warming to climate change, job creation. Exciting. It's exciting.
I've only been given 10 minutes for the interview because I know you got to run to a rally. This is just the beginning. I'm hoping, and I hope we get to pick this up again.
Well, thank you very much for allowing us to engage in a substantive type discussion.
Thanks very much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.
Hey guys, so they're taking a quick break before the panel at 7:30. So joining me is senior editor Paul J. Paul, so how were the highlights? What were the highlights of the interview with Danny Glover and Bernie Sanders?
Right. I would say one thing really jumped off the page for me. His proposal on infrastructure spending, like $1 trillion, it's always seemed a little general to me. And as I said in the interview, there's a real problem we know of in Baltimore, but of course in cities and really across the country, excuse me, fighting a cough, that when this infrastructure money gets spent, when there's stimulus spending, a portion of it, I think, is kind of positive. It goes to cities and states, and they hire teachers and other public sector workers, and if they've laid off people from the public sector, it's useful. But when they really try to do longer-term jobs, especially attached to infrastructure, the spending often doesn't go into people's pockets who need jobs. What I mean by that, in Baltimore, for example, more than $2.5 billion of public money has gone into develop the Inner Harbor. And this was all done in the name of reducing poverty and creating more jobs. And it did very little of it. It created a few hundred minimum wage jobs, service sector, fast food restaurant jobs. And in fact, there's pretty good evidence that more public money went in than any spill-off that came out. And certainly during the time of even some of the most booming years of the Inner Harbor, we have the highest of unemployment, the murder rate continues to rise, and so on and so on. So I asked Sanders this, that if you're going to do this infrastructure spending, one model that actually seemed to really create jobs was the New Deal, the direct program of the Roosevelt, where they hired millions of people directly on federal payroll and of all kinds, including even cultural workers and farm workers, and they built massive infrastructure projects from dams to bridges and fixing roads and things. that would he do that? Because I've never heard him say that before. And, you know, as a democratic socialist, you'd think he'd be all for doing things through the public sector. And so, lo and behold, he was. Maybe he has said it before, but I hadn't heard it. I asked him, would you support that kind of a jobs plan? And he said yes twice. I think that's kind of, you know, dramatic if he ever is in the position to do that. And frankly, if he would advocate something like that, whether he wins or doesn't win, it's the kind of a demand that might come out of this movement that's been developing around him, political revolution he talks about. So I'd say that, you know, that was probably what was new about the interview.
So the Row News actually has been covering a lot of the Bernie Sanders campaign. There's been talk about bias towards Hillary. What is your response to that?
Bias towards Hillary.
Bias towards Bernie. I'm sorry.
Bernie. Yeah, we get this question. You know, is the Real News pro Bernie, pro Sanders, and such? You know, we've never said we're not biased. First of all, you read any of our documents about our editorial approach. We've always said, in fact, we are biased. And we've also said there's no such thing without bias. There's no journalism without bias because journalists are humans and they have their own interests. And, you know, you can't get apart from your interests. You know, it's your own bread and butter. What we said is we practice verifiable journalism. We go where facts are. That's the objectivity of ours, but we we never don't have an interest. But we do have a bias. So what's our bias? Well, our bias is what's best for the interest of the majority of people. What's best, who are in fact mostly working people. So you do get down to what's best for the interest of working people. That's a bias. We do start our analysis from there. So when we look at the different candidates that are possible in this election, I think the facts are that the Sanders proposals are more in the interests of ordinary working people than the other candidates in the mainstream parties. And right now we're primarily covering the Democratic primary, to some extent the Republican primary, because that's what's going on right now. Once these primaries are over and there's an actual straight election up, we'll spend more time covering some of the other parties, like the Greens and others, who are contending for these positions. But our bias is what's best for ordinary people, working people. And I use that word ordinary with all due respect because we obviously prefer ordinary people to the elites. Anyway, there's a conversation obviously we're going to pick up again.
Yeah.
But now the music's going, so maybe you want to go back.
Yeah, so we're going to cut and bring you inside.
the actor and activist Danny Glover. Danny, well, most of us, everybody knows about all of Danny's movies. Obviously, he has thrilled all of us on the big screen many times. So, I mean, you know the politics of actors. His partnership with Mel Gibson is one of the ones that wraps the next time when you find out two sideways. But if you know Danny Glover, you know his heart has been in this fight from the very beginning when he was an activist at San Francisco State. He's never been up and building the beloved community that Dr. King fought for. And that has been so much of his involvement in this campaign is about. Thank you, Danny. Next, I'm going to ask my brother, Jesus Perez, to come on up. Jesus is a leader in Casa de Maryland. He's one of those young people. He is one of those young people in that here in Maryland, when we decided that we would abolish the death penalty, pass marriage equality, expand voting rights, pass sexual safety reform, and some folks said, well, the DREAM Act can wait. Jesus said, no, it can't. And in that year, we did all of that, and we passed the DREAM Act too, because of the activism of young people.
What you're getting at.
If I'm looking to my right. Good? All right. If I is my joy to bring out tonight the second night of Passover, the man who will be not just the most progressive president this country has ever seen, but also the first Jewish president of these. A man whose credentials in the civil rights movement run deep. He was chairman of the Congress of Racial Equality chapter at the University of Chicago in 1962, and led his chapter into merging with SNP. When John Lewis and I finally start talking again, I'll remind him maybe you couldn't see him because he had your back. In 1988, he delivered the state of Vermont for Jesse Jackson. But he was working the campaign in 1984 when it was truly a civil rights activist enterprise. And when I was president CEO of the NAACP, we knew we could always rely on Senator Bernie Sanders, because while he may have had a D- with the NRA, he had a plus with us. So ladies and gentlemen, let me not deny you, Bernie Sanders any longer the next president of these United States. Sit down. This is a great turnout, and I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I want to thank the panelists, and I look forward to a very good discussion. I want to start off by just throwing out some thoughts. I want you to hear this. In Baltimore, Maryland, 1 out of every 4 people lives in poverty. Baltimore, Maryland, over 80% of the children in the public schools are on free or reduced lunches.
In Baltimore, Maryland, poverty is a death sentence. You know what I mean by that? What I mean by that is that if you're born in Baltimore's poorest neighborhood, your life expectancy is almost 20 years less than if you're born in the wealthiest neighborhood. 15 Baltimore neighborhoods have lower life expectancies than North Korea. Baltimore teenagers between the ages of 15 and 19 face poor health conditions and a worse economic outlook than those in economically distressed cities in Nigeria, India, China, and South Africa. This is what is going on in Baltimore. This is what is going on in inner cities all across this country. This is taking place at a time when we are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We've got some work to do, brothers and sisters. It is not acceptable to me that children in Baltimore go hungry or people sleep out in cars when the top 1/10 of 1% now owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. In this country today, people are working longer hours for lower wages. 58% of all new income is going to the top 1%. That is not what this economy is about. It is not too much to ask that we have an economy that works for working families, not just the top 1%. In Baltimore, in Philadelphia, in Detroit, in Chicago, in cities all across this country, we have youth unemployment rates of 40, 50, 60%. Kids graduate high school, they want to stand up on their own 2 feet, they want to become adults, they want to go out in the world, they want to earn a living, but they can't find a job year after year after year. Should we be surprised that when 50% of kids in a neighborhood are unemployed, that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth? Unemployment is a pipeline to jail. You want to hear a not so radical idea, and that is that we invest in our young people in jobs and in education, not in jails, not in hospitals. Here's another not so radical idea. My parents never had any money. I grew up in a rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York. My parents never went to college. In Baltimore, all over this country, there are kids whose parents never went to college, and many of these kids don't know families where people went to college. I want to make public colleges and universities tuition-free. Two reasons. Number one, I do not want young people to leave school with $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt as the state wants to pay. Everybody knows that to make it into the middle class, for us to be a successful economy, we need the best educated workforce in the world. We should be encouraging our young people to get a good education, not punishing them for years of debt. But the second reason I want to make public colleges and universities tuition-free is there are kids in Baltimore, kids in my own city, families don't have a lot of money. And the idea of going to college is to them no different than the idea of going to Mars or Saturn. It's not something that they think is possible. But we can create a culture which says to every mom and dad, every teacher, every kid, that if the children do their schoolwork seriously in the 4th grade and in the 6th grade, that if they study hard, regardless of their income, they will be able to get a college degree. The essential problem of America right now is we have an economy that is doing great if you're in the 1%. But if you're the rest of the 99%, it is not doing very well at all. We have today families working 2 or 3 jobs in order to bring together enough income and health care to pay the bills. That is not what this economy should be about. So what are we going to do about it? The first thing that we are going to do is understand that if you work 40 hours in America, you should not be living in poverty. We're going to raise the minimum wage 15%. Decent wages, we understand that women are making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. Pay equity for women workers. This is not a sexy issue, but it is an enormously important issue that is changing our disastrous trade policies. All over this country, corporations have said, why do I want to pay an American worker 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour? I'll shut down in Maryland, shut down in Vermont, throw people out on the street. I'll go to China, Mexico, pay people pennies an hour. If I'm elected president, that is going to change. These companies will get they want us to buy their products every night on TV, buy this, buy that. If they want us to buy their products, maybe they should start manufacturing those products here in Maryland, in Vermont, in America. The essence of this campaign is asking people to think outside of the box, think outside of the status quo. This is the United States of America. A couple of months ago, I was in Flint, Michigan. What I saw and heard in Flint, Michigan was literally almost beyond comprehension that it was taking place in the United States in 2016. I was talking to parents who were watching the cognitive capabilities of their children decline because of lead in the water those children had been drinking. Poison water. And Flint, Michigan is not the only community in America with inadequate water supply, with filthy water. This is America. We should not have an infrastructure which is collapsing. We should not have buildings that I just walked past a few minutes ago, which are all boarded up when we desperately need affordable housing. Youth unemployment in communities all over America, we should be training those kids how to rebuild their communities. Decent paying jobs, water systems that provide clean water, wastewater plants that do what has to be done. My state, Vermont, our bridges are in massive disrepair, roads need work. We used to have the best rail system and mass transit systems in the world, no longer the case. Airports need a whole lot of work. We can put 13 million people back to work at decent paying jobs. We can do that. So what this campaign is saying to you is pretty simple. And that is, in my view, it is too late for establishment politics and establishment economics. Does anyone? What the campaign is also saying, and this is a very important point that no other candidate for president will tell you, is that no president, not Bernie Sanders, not anybody else, can address the crisis that we face alone. We need a political revolution, millions of people standing up and moving forward. And that's the truth. When I deal with these people, I'm a United States Senator, and I deal with these guys every day. Wall Street has unlimited sums of money, and I use the word unlimited advisedly. Corporate America would shut down a plant here and move to China if they could make $5 more. Corporate media will tell you everything you never wanted to know, but not what you need to know about what's happening in people. I am very proud of the only candidate running for president who does not have a super PAC. I don't want Wall Street's PAC. All of that means, and I don't have to lecture anybody in this room because you all know it better than I do. Change, real change in this country. Danny Glover, others will tell you more about this than I do. It never, ever takes place from the top on down. It's never some guy up there. It's never some guy up there signing a bill. It is millions of people demanding that change. Where we are at this moment in history. The American people are looking around and they're saying, how does it happen that we see more and more millionaires and billionaires, but we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth? Does that make sense? Why does it happen that the middle class of this country continues to decline and all new income and wealth goes to the top 1%? How does it happen that in America we are the only major country not to provide paid family and medical leave? How does it happen? I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. They provide health care to all of their people. They've been doing it for decades. So do they do it in the United Kingdom. Since after World War II, everybody in the UK gets health care. France does it, Germany does it, Scandinavia does it. How come every other wealthy country can provide health care to all of their people except the United States? How come we are forced to pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? How come we have more people in jail than any other country on earth? We got a lot of work to do, and we have got to do it together. I can't, people, I go to rallies, people say, Bernie, that's great. I can't do it alone. We are in this together. Not me, it's all of us. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank this beautiful church for allowing us to use this facility this evening. And I want to thank our panelists. Let's go on with the discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, well, we're going to dive right into the question and answer period. We're going to start with Senator Sanders. Senator Sanders, towards the end of your remarks, you talked about the fact that we are a mass incarceration nation. Here in our great state, we spend about $288 million a year on locking up people from inner cities like Baltimore, increasingly from rural areas too, as the war on crack shifts to the war on meth. Many of the folks who are locked up are young men of color, specifically black men. How can we help cities like Baltimore curb mass incarceration, specifically curb mass incarceration of young people of color, and reinvest those dollars saved from reducing the prison population?
Okay, thanks. This is a vitally important issue. It's an important issue in Baltimore. It's an important issue in our country. We got 2.2 million people nationally in jail. We're spending $80 billion a year to lock people up. So number one, we've got to understand some of the causes as to why people are getting arrested. As I mentioned earlier, we have to invest for our young people in jobs and education, not jails and incarceration. If we focus on it, it's not a mystery. You give kids jobs, you give them decent schooling, and the likelihood is they will not be in trouble. If they have no income coming in, then there is problems that can take place. Number two, we have to deal with the whole issue of local police departments in this country. Let's talk about a little bit about that and what we've got to do. For a start, in terms of incarceration, we're talking about often over-policing. We're talking about police departments that for the average person in the community look like oppressive forces rather than parts of the community, which means that we have to demilitarize local police departments. Means that we need police forces that reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. It means, very importantly, you touched on this, Ben, it's a tough issue. Not everybody may agree with me, but we have to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Just to give you an example of what I mean, over the last 30 years, millions of Americans, millions, have received police records for possession of marijuana. Millions. Now it turns out that according to the number of studies, the black community and the white community do marijuana at about equal levels. And yet blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than are whites. I think we have got to reach the stage where we understand that marijuana should not be a Schedule I drug under the Federal Controlled Substances Act. So there are a lot of things that have to be done. But the bottom line is, for me, if elected president, we will not have more people in jail than any other country on earth. And by the way, this is one of the few areas that actually conservatives and Republicans agree with progressives. Because they understand that it makes more sense to send a kid to the University of Maryland than to lock them up because it's cheaper to do that. So we've got to get to the causes of incarceration. And also, by the way, in a related issue, we have 2 million people in this country today who, because they were felons and went to jail, have lost the right to vote. For elected president, we're going to change that. People who are So, last point that I want to make on this one. Our job is to do everything we can to keep people out of jail. And that is why we have to end private corporate ownership of prisons and detention centers. There is a perverse incentive. If you make money by incarcerating somebody, you're going to have a system which encourages more and more people to go to jail. We want the opposite of that.
To Brother Jesus Perez, Casa de Maryland. With the school-to-prison pipeline being such a controversial issue that directly affects people of color, what actions can we take to put an end to the school-to-prison pipeline?
Well, first of all, you gonna? Is that your question? No.
Thank you. Such an honor to be here trying to, I think it's, starting to listen to students. We have to, I am a product of Baltimore City public school systems here, and I actually live not too far from here. So I think it's time to start listening to students, as we also have a voice in the school system. I was also, just to give you a little bit of history of myself, I was part of the Student Government Association at Patterson High School here in Baltimore City. Then I get to president for the SGA, but with just listening to school, working with the schools, working with the parents, working with everybody that wants a better future. And like people say in Baltimore, it takes a village to raise the kids. Well, it's going to take a whole village to better educate our schools, our students here in Baltimore City and around the nation too.
Look, the issue really gets back to what our national priorities are. As a nation, are we capable of having excellent public schools? Of course we are. And what does that require? It requires, first of all, as a nation, to appreciate the importance of education, to make sure that we have the best and the brightest young people going into teaching, going into education, respecting those teachers, paying them good wages and good benefits, making that a profession that the whole community is having. It means having first-class schools, schools that are not crumbling, schools that have the technology that the children need in today's world. Can we afford to do that? Well, you know what? We have spent trillions of dollars on a war in Iraq we never should have gotten into. We do have enough money to have good teachers and good schools, and if we make it clear that students do well, we'll be able to get free tuition at public colleges and universities. A lot of those kids will become motivated to do better. All right? That is not a radical idea. Once again, this is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Yes, we can have excellent quality public schools in America.
Next question is to Reverend Dr. Jamal Bryant. Look, man, the streets of Baltimore have just become rivers of blood again, in ways that we hope we'll never see again just in the past year. What do we need to be doing to put an end to the out-of-control gun violence in our urban cities like Baltimore?
Thank you, Ben. In 1965, Dr. King said in Chicago, while the senator was still there, he said that crime is the bride of poverty, and that somewhere or another, whenever you see crime, poverty is close by. And what America has done is declared war on crime without ever declaring war on poverty. What you see in Baltimore is really an outcry for people who want jobs and opportunities. It was my privilege to tour our senator through Sandtown about 5 months ago, and we went through the very community where Freddie Gray was killed, and young people kept crying one thing: are you going to bring jobs here? The misnomer that mass media tries to represent is that young black males don't want to have an opportunity, do not have any drive, don't have any goals, and all of that is a lie. There are so many who really want and it is regrettable that the responsibility of Senator Sanders is to undo a policy of the incarceration clinics, who really put in place for massive incarceration to take place without giving job opportunities. What Berkeley was discussing is that Freddie Gray was killed 6 blocks from Coppin State. But it was never an option for him because we could not think about how you're going to pay for it, because you always have access to debt but never access to capital. So when young people to develop multi-billion-dollar drug corporations, if in fact they had the access to develop legitimate corporations, they could do so. To that end, if in fact in Colorado where marijuana has become legal, you cannot open up a franchise to distribute if in fact you have a record, putting aside the people who have mastered how to market drugs. And so if we want to really battle violence in Baltimore and in urban centers across America, it does not call for greater policing. It calls for greater access to capital and job development. And we can sit and allow Under Armour to build up a billion-dollar community without letting minorities have a seat at the table, even if they feed them into
This is what stunned me. There was not a grocery store in that community. How do you get fresh produce? How do you get food if there is not a grocery store in the community, especially if you don't have a car? There was not a branch bank in the community, not one. The only thing was there were payday lenders who charged people unbelievable interest rates and steal their money. So when we talk about rebuilding communities, what we are talking about is $1 trillion investment over 5 years, which includes investments in inner cities in America, affordable housing, schools, health clinics, the things that people need to thrive and to grow. Now, when we talk about guns, let us be clear. As somebody who has a D- voting record from the NRA, back in 1988, I ran for statewide office, running for the one seat we have in Vermont for the Congress. There were 3 people in the race. 2 of them said, yeah, we should sell assault weapons, that's okay. I said no, assault weapons are designed to kill people. Nothing to do with hunting. We should ban assault weapons. That's why I said that. That's what I said. Our job is to pass gun safety legislation which basically says that people who should not own guns should not be able to buy guns. That means expanding, as President Obama is attempting to do, the instant background check, making sure that guns do not fall into the hands of people who have criminal records or have emotional issues and should not own guns. Second of all, it means we do away with things like the gun show loopholes. Right now, you can buy a gun legally if through a non-licensed gun dealer at a gun show or on the internet. That is pretty crazy. We should eliminate that. Thirdly, we should do away with the provision of what we call the straw man. That means you walk into a gun store, you legally purchase a gun, but then you go out and you sell it to criminals. Fourth, we should do away with any kind of legal protection for gun store owners or manufacturers who knowingly sell guns to people who should not have them. There is a lot to do in terms of gun safety. There is a lot to do in investing in inner city communities, because at the end of the day, if we are going to create jobs for young people in the inner cities, the people who are going to do it are going to be the small and medium-sized African-American business people, and they need help to make that happen.
So the question, Senator Sanders, has come up in different ways about what to do about housing in our inner city, what to do about creating more opportunity. We have programs here like TIF that Reverend Bryant talked about, which is coming into play with the big $1 billion project over on the south side that's being planned by Mr. Clinton. What are some ways that we can reinvest into disadvantaged neighborhoods and communities to create more jobs and housing? And how do you plan to hold city and state governments accountable, Mr. President?
Firstly, it turns out that the crisis in affordable housing is a crisis that impacts cities and towns all over this country, and it is a crisis that today we're doing relatively little to address. When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, we started a program, the first municipality in the United States of America, called the Community Housing Trust Fund. And what we did with city money is we bought housing, and we said that that housing will be perpetually affordable because the land on the housing was owned by the trust and people could not sell it at market rate. And it has been an enormous success maintaining affordable, sustainably affordable housing. Number two, when I was in the Congress, and what that means is you can own a home, and when you leave it, it stays affordable because you don't sell it at market rate. You get a little bit of a profit, but it keeps housing affordable. Second thing we did, along with Congresswoman Lee of Oakland a number of years ago, I passed what was called the Low-Income or the Affordable Housing Trust Program. One of the crises facing this country having to do with homelessness, having to do with the fact that people are paying 40, 50, 60% of their limited incomes in housing. Now, how do you survive if you're paying 60% of your income in housing? How do you have money to do anything else? I don't know how you do it. So what we are going to do, and what that legislation passed, we now have a few $100 million into it. We need more. And that is to start building low-income affordable housing. That's what we need to build. We're not doing it. We're not doing it. And you know what? The public housing that exists in many parts of this country is now deteriorating because we're not putting enough money into it to maintain decent standards, and that housing is crumbling. So a major priority for a progressive administration, for a Sanders administration, is to make sure that every person in this country has safe, affordable, decent quality housing and a rent that they can afford. So, it's a funny thing. I mentioned to you a little while ago, this is how the world changes. My brother was telling me that when we were growing up, we didn't have any money. And we lived in what we call a rent-controlled apartment. Do you got any rent control here in Baltimore? All right. Anyhow, we did it in New York City when I was growing up. And what my brother reminded me is that we were paying about 15% of our family's income for housing. Can you imagine that? The housing, the rent control, in other words, the landlord could not raise the rents. The rents were such that we were only paying about 15% of what my dad was earning for rent. Anybody know any human being in the world now paying 15% of their income for housing? they're paying 40, 50%. That's the change in the world. Housing isn't right. You can't be a human being, live with dignity, if you do not have affordable housing. Let's build that housing.
Danny and Courtney, I want to put you guys both in here. Both of you guys can just talk about, from your perspective, what more we could be doing to increase opportunity in our communities, to increase wealth, to increase job.
I tell you, I'm so energized by what everyone else has said, how everyone else has responded to the extraordinary questions. We should have town hall meetings like this in every city, men and women and young people in this audience here live these issues every single day. When I came to the city of San Francisco to work in the Model Cities program in September of 1971, the Model Cities program, and some of you in this audience probably heard about the Model Cities program and know about the Model Cities program. Look at the array of programs that were on the docket at that time. One, in the Mission District, Hispanic District, Latino District, the Mission Hiring Home, the Mission Cultural Center, the Mission Reading Program, which I was the program manager and evaluation specialist at that time, in 1972, 1973, for one of the 25 best reading programs in the country. The Bud David Hunters Point, the Black community, the Baby Hunters Point Community College, Young Community Development. The leader of that, the young man, Carl Everhart, who was the young 20-year-old who ran that program, and directed that program, became one of the vice mayors in San Francisco at one point. These are the kind of programs that we're talking about. Business development, small business development program, the Baby Hunters Point housing program, in which they put money in and use leveraging at a bank, Wells Fargo at the time, a small bank, not a national bank, use leveraging in order to get housing loans for people to improve their house. These are the kind of creative, imaginative things that were happening. But it came at an extraordinary moment when I call grassroots community organic democracy, with women like Eloise Westbrook, Espinola Jackson, national names became national names, were there at the center of these decisions. But it was under the girth by what people desired and what they wanted. They were asked, even though the program had little bit of money, very little bit of money in terms of that, in reference to only $3 million for 2 communities, the fact that they kept leveraging that, and the fact that there was a mission and a purpose, and people were involved in the process. We gotta get people involved in this process. That's it, the bottom line. Your voice, right here, whether it comes in education. We talk about education. Education. We were in New Orleans with Robert Moses, one of the great civil rights leaders in this country. In New Orleans, in pre-Katrina, talking about quality education as a civil right. This country does not have a national education plan. It never has. Even the national projects in which we empower people around the issues of education. We have empowered people around the issues around job development, youth employment. We knew when I was in the model petition program that we were going to have X amount of jobs, and that summer jobs for young people. We knew that. There was a program funded for young people. You know that. Some of you already remember that. To tell stories. When my mother and father came to the post office in 1948, it marked an expansion, the beginning of an expansion in all areas of governance. And that allowed them the job opportunity, the possibility of really living a middle-class life. At the time, we were living in the projects. I lived in the federal housing projects until I was 11 years old. My parents were able to save up enough money and buy a home in 1957 for roughly $11,000. The house that I grew up in the neighborhood that I still live in. I still live in the same neighborhood since I was 11 years old. The neighborhood I live in that sense. We
said, power only concedes upon demand. It never had any presidency, he's going to work with us to take that power.
Danny, you know, if you had a church, I would come to it every Sunday. Kwame, will you please chime in and give us the young activist perspective on how we increase opportunity in cities like Baltimore?
Well, I think it's a very short answer. I agree with a lot with what Mr. Danny Glover said, but I think it's a short answer. We need investments. This country is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but yet the wealth is being spent in the wrong places. We're spending money on war, but not money on education. So my little brother, who's 18 years old, has to drop out of college because he doesn't get financial aid because we don't meet the FAFSA line. So he has to join the military. There's jobs in the military, but there's not jobs in the streets. We don't invest in community-based organizations who have the authority and the power to put forth effort in the communities which will keep peace coming. And it's also about, investing, when we're talking about investing in education, we don't do enough for young children in the city to have programs that are beneficial to them. Young children in Baltimore City do not learn like the children in Montgomery County, Maryland. They have very different living conditions. To increase opportunity, we need to be able to have the hope to live. We need investment in, like Senator Sanders said, there are no grocery stores in Sandtown, Winchester. There are no grocery stores. Half of Baltimore City is a food desert, and over half of the population is black. So if that says that we don't have access to healthy food, if we don't have access to, you are what you eat. So if you don't have access to healthy food, you won't never be anything healthy. We need investment. We need money. Money makes the world go round, and money and investment in our youth will make this country spin a lot better.
So special is that everybody up here is an activist and has been an activist virtually their entire adult life. Senator Sanders, you and my dad are in a small circle of people. There were very few white men who got locked up in the Congress of Racial Equality, pushing for desegregation. My dad got locked up right here in Baltimore in 1966 for the entire week in jail, trying to accelerate desegregation in Baltimore. As the last question, before we go to the question and answer from the audience, I would want to ask you something I've not had a chance to ask you on this campaign, which is, what was the dream that inspired you then? What was the hope that inspired you then? And what of that dream still inspires you in this campaign? Because we have never quite seen. We've seen civil rights activists run for president. We have not seen them get this far in running for president. And I want to know what part of that dream that inspired you into the streets when you were young, inspired you to risk your life going to jail when you were young, being picked up by the cops when you were young, still inspires you now.
It's a hard question to answer that, but I think from my earliest days, I just hated to see people pushed around. I hated to see people with power taking advantage of people who did not have any power. And maybe when you grow up in a family that does not have a lot of money and you see, people on top doing all kinds of things to people on the bottom not being able to do something, it brought forth a reaction to me that said, I'm going to fight that type of injustice for my life, and that's what I've tried to do. Where have we come? In some ways we have made real progress as a nation, no question about it. But when I look at the statistics that I just read to you, what's going on here in Baltimore, what Kwame was just saying, it is hard to imagine that in a nation which has every day more and more millionaires and billionaires, people are living, in grocery stores in the community. Kids can't get a halfway decent education. You see the brother who can't go to college, joins the military to get an education, but he can't a decent paying job in this community? This is pretty crazy stuff. And it gets back to what Danny Glover was saying in a moment. No one has ever given people anything. They've always had to fight for what was right. And if there's anything that I'm proud about in this campaign, it's that we are trying to bring people together to stand up and tell the 1% that this country just doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the kids in Baltimore. These kids have a right to get a good education. Parents have a right to a grocery store in their community. Small business people have a right to affordable loans so they can create decent paying jobs. And what this campaign is doing is saying it's not about me, it is about all of us. And if we stand together, we don't let the drums of the world divide us up. If we have a vision, Dr. King talked about a vision, the Bible talks about a vision. People cannot go forward without a vision. We know what the vision is. You've heard it here today. We just need to stand together and fight for that vision. And if we do that, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Every idea that has been proposed here tonight is an idea supported by the vast majority of the American people. Now, maybe it's not supported by Wall Street, and maybe it's not supported by the 1%, but the vast majority of the American people know we can do a heck of a lot better than we are currently doing for working families and low-income people and the middle class. And that's what this campaign is about.
Bernie Sanders candidacy, that's why we fight. That's why we organize. That's why we knock on doors. That's why we make calls. That's why we never give up as long as there's a path to victory, and there is still a path to victory. All right, so we have questions from the audience, and there's some young people who, now I'm going to call on you, and the first one goes to Jonathan Davidson from the Baltimore Urban Debate League. Jonathan, just come to the mic, please. Come on up. Look at that, we're rocking a dashiki in 2016. Fremont, brother, the rest will follow. Come on up. Gotta watch out for a debater in a dashiki.
My question's for Jamal Bryant. What kind of changes would you want to see in our communities? Like different from the violence and whatnot? Like how would you want to uplift the communities?
Say it again, please.
What type of different changes would you want to see in the communities? Different from the violence and whatnot, like the crime? Like what other changes would you want to see?
I would like to see really a passing of the baton. For us to come now a year after the Freddie Gray uprising. I want to first say to the activists, do not think your demonstration was in vain. The reality is you won't read this in the Sun, you won't see it in the paper. Had we not had the uprising, our mayor would have run again. Had we not had the uprising, we would have had the same construction. I think that now the Band-Aid has been ripped off because the last time Baltimore really came to this point was in 1968 after the killing of Dr. King. Now the world knows we have 16,000 abandoned homes. The world knows we have 70,000 heroin addicts. The world knows we have 42% high school dropout rate. So what I'd like to see is that we're 45 minutes from DC and that Baltimore not be treated as an outlier, but we're the heartbeat of Maryland, but we're treated like the stepchild. So I'd like to see development in our communities beyond Clark and Wright Street, but that we really see something happen beyond North Avenue. And so I really want us to go from hood to community. And if we move to that, I think that we'll be in a better place.
There are 70,000
Heroin addicts
in Baltimore.
in Baltimore.
You know, that is unbelievable. I mean, I don't live in Baltimore. Just hearing that is unbelievable. I mean, it touches on another issue very briefly. And that when it comes to addiction or opiate addiction, we need to address these issues as health-related issues, not criminal issues.
Our next question goes to David Pontius from City Council. David?
Good evening, Senator Sanders, fellow panelists. I'm, like you said, a senior at a local high school. And recently, students here in Baltimore have expressed concern about standardized testing, such as the new park exam. Senator Sanders, what is your opinion on state and federal mandates of standardized tests, which often marginalize low-income and minority students?
Excellent question. I voted against the No Child Left Behind Act. And I am on the committee which is ending the No Child Left Behind Act. The function of a good teacher is not to teach you how to take tests. The function of a good teacher is to see the kid in his or her entirety, to work with that kid, to see that child grow day by day, not use standardized tests. So, you know, testing has a role, but I think we are over-testing many kids in many states in this country.
Can I say something to that? Can I say something to that question?
Please hear me.
There's a school for young women called the Martha Ferguson Academy in Detroit, Michigan. And now we know Detroit as the home of modern industry, but the poster child for deindustrialization. But this school for women, young women in high school who were pregnant or had children was a functioning school, an extraordinary academy that graduated 90% of the students. 70% of the young women did not have children, another child, within a 2-3 year period. It also, almost 100% of these young women went on to further their education and further their lives and develop and everything else. The city of Detroit, as bankrupt as it is financially, was bankrupt in imagination. They kept trying to close that school down. Why? It was successful. It was successful in a sense. Whatever they were doing in that sense, in that school, needed to be replicated in other places. Not exactly the same way, but that should have been a model in terms of the way in which we look at education. Testing is for accountability. It has nothing to do with a child's knowledge or everything. In places like Seattle, there have been movements to not test. And they've been successful movements not to test. We're not going to test our children. Those movements are important movements as we build this resistance and talk about education and talk about teaching as a profession. The whole craft of teaching has been deprofessionalized all across there. Look at what organize the community and tell them, talk to those. And yet they were still, and though they won this strike, the mayor shut down something like, 300 schools or 35 schools in Chicago. We have to figure out how we now talk about, as Bob Moses would say, if you give me strategic opportunities for the bottom quartile, I raise the boat for everybody. You understand what I'm saying? Strategic opportunities of using techniques to teach children to be functional and to learn that and appreciate that in that sense. So there are ways in which we can really work with the process of teaching children, not just testing them, but teaching them.
All right, well, guys, it's been a beautiful evening. We have time for 2 more questions, and so I'm going to ask the young lady at the mic to please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hello, panelists, Senator Sanders. My name is Shay Elamo from Towson University. I'm an officer of the Black Student Union at Towson University. My question is that recently there have been uprisings on college campuses across the nation due to poor responses and hate bias reporting, especially racially motivated hate bias reporting, and the rhetoric used to justify the non-responses, that there are no laws in place, to police hate bias. There's nothing that denotes like procedures that should be taken in the case of hate bias, and most students, myself included, feel very uncomfortable and unsafe on campus, unwelcome on the campus. And so something that I thought about is the Title IX Act, which is the federal mandate that fights against sexual violence, sexual harassment. It denotes your rights under the Title IX Act as a victim of sexual harassment, procedures if you are a witness, and procedures the university is supposed to take in the case of the sexual harassment. So my question to you is, what can the federal government do to improve the conditions of hate bias reporting on college campuses?
Good The federal government has a certain amount of leverage in this issue because the federal government puts a lot of money in one capacity or another into colleges and universities throughout this country. And then your point is that we say that it is illegal, unacceptable for people to be sexually abused, sexually harassed. Well, if that is true, people should not be harassed because of the color of their skin. All right? And we should make it clear that we can do that. We can do that. Where there are hate crimes on campus, where people are being attacked in one way or another for racist reasons, that should be against the law, and colleges and universities must be held accountable.
Well, if you could please introduce yourself and say your question.
I'm Keanu Smith-Brown. I am a college student at the University of Baltimore. My question is to you, Senator Sanders. We're all familiar with your position on minimum wage set at $15 per hour, and most of us in this room likely support that. However, there is a larger question about how adoption of social principles will affect labor and wages, particularly in today's economy. President Obama has seen years of consecutive private sector job growth, but has failed to realize higher wage earning jobs. He claims the TPP would do just that, create higher wage earning jobs, but we know that service jobs will be outsourced as a result. How will the Sanders administration create higher wage earning jobs for skilled, trained, and future career professionals like me?
Okay. I love the president. I work with the president on many issues. I disagree with him on trade policies. I am opposed to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. As I mentioned earlier, our trade policy has resulted in the loss of millions of decent paying jobs. Corporations shut down here and they move abroad. What we need to do is, number one, demand that corporations start investing in the United States of America. We have the leverage to do that. And when they start investing, those are decent paying jobs. And if you have a minimum wage of $15 an hour, it means that everybody in this country who works 40 hours a week will not be living in poverty. Second of all, and it's the point that Dr. Bryant made a moment ago, and that is we have got to assist and make sure that federal contracts, federal grants, goes to those communities that need it the most. And if we are concerned about the crisis of unemployment among young people in African American communities, then we've got to provide the assistance to small and medium-sized African American businesses and get them to start hiring the kids who desperately need jobs at decent wages.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It's been a wonderful night.
All right, everybody. My name is Aaron Simmons. Aaron from Baltimore, from the Sandtown, Winchester area. from our ancestors get channeled down to us. How do you restore our mental stability? How do you do it after the Jim Crow, the Willie Lynch, the Ron L. Hubbard, J. Edgar Hoover, COINTELPRO, Dianetics, which manipulated the South Africans. What else? The Declaration of Independence was actually formed while we were in slavery. So how can we get that changed? Amendment 13 is actually, a felon is actually undermined name for slavery. As of Amendment 13, sorry, Civil Service for walking up. But how can we get past all of this? Like I said, DNA is information. Everything get channeled down from ancestors down to us. How do we get past the Jim Crow? How do we get past Willie Lynch? How do we get past...
So I think the answer to that, because I share some of the similar beliefs that you have, and I've met you several times, the answer to that is by having dialogues in spaces like this, where we can all talk about our experiences, talk about our the trauma from the history of America, and also work with individuals on the other side of the aisle who are in positions of power that can actually enact the things in which will help us.
Dr. George Drury wrote a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Is that we really have not talked about the traumatic psychological impact that black people have had. That think about 9-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 5-year-olds going to bed every night, hearing the sounds of bullets and sirens, and they have to adjust to dysfunction as if it's normal. And I think that part of it is that the first step to recovery is admitting we have a problem. And I think that you're doing something that we're trying to the evidence of it to show the psychological abuse that is continuously impacted on black people is Monday, everybody was cheering about Harriet Tubman being on the front of the $20 bill to find out Wednesday Andrew Jackson is still on the back. So they have to keep living through that. Says that America really has not talked about a holistic development, not just throwing money, not just throwing scholarships, but we still bear the marks and the pain of slavery that the senator talked about earlier. It's not 100 years ago. It's just one generation ago, and we've got to give some redress, but I think that you raised a very valid issue and concern.
Thank you for your question. One of the hardest things when you're hosting a formal presidential candidate is that we have to keep Senator Clinton. So we have our good friend here who's running for mayor of Baltimore on the Green Party ticket.